Morning, Westside. Hey, there is a really great word that shows up repeatedly throughout the Bible. It's actually more of a family of words. It's an adjective and an adverb that both stem from the central noun form of the word. And words from this family are used 181 times in the New Testament. That's quite a few. 30% of those occurrences, that's nearly a third of the occurrences, happen in the Gospel of John. So it's a theme that John is particularly interested in, apparently. Right out of the gate, he uses the adjective once and the noun form twice, right there in his introduction to the book in the first 18 verses. And the last time he uses the noun in his gospel, it's the subject of a question that one of the characters of the story asks. And I think it's probably also one of those questions that the author intends for the reader to be asking. You know what I mean? It's in a pretty tense scene in John chapter 18. Jesus is standing there being tried for treason. And he's standing before Pilate, the Roman governor of that region. And Pilate was not known to be particularly cooperative with the Jews. He often made moves just to tick them off, just to agitate them, just to try to show them who's boss, show them who's in charge. But he had to manage that tension because if he let things get out of control and the Jews rioted or threatened revolt, it would have been on his head. And he, of course, always wants to stay in the good graces of Tiberius, the emperor. Now, the Jewish leaders want Jesus dead for claiming to be God. They don't believe this claim, so they see this as just utterly blasphemous, and they want Jesus dead. But they don't have the authority to exact capital punishment. Only Rome has that authority. And Pilate, of course, he doesn't give a rip about some Jewish guy breaking some religious laws. And so the Jewish leaders have to frame Jesus' offense in a way that trips Pilate's capital punishment trigger finger. Treason fits the bill. Now, at this point, many people are calling Jesus the Messiah, the promised king from heaven sent to free people from oppression. And when people address Jesus as their king, he doesn't deny it. He just audaciously accepts that title. So, adding just an ounce of exaggeration, the Jewish leaders bring Jesus to Pilate. And they say, listen, Pilate, this guy is claiming to be king. Well, Pilate knows that that's not something Tiberius is going to be real cool with. And so he asks Jesus point blank, are you the king of the Jews? And after a little back and forth, Jesus says that line that you may be familiar with. He says, well, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my followers would be fighting with swords and stones, but it's not that kind of kingdom. My kingdom isn't from around here. And Pilate says, aha, so you are a king then, huh? And Jesus says, well, those aren't my words. He says, you say that I'm a king. And in fact, that is the reason I was born. I was born and came into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who's on the side of truth listens to my voice. And Pilate, wrapping up the conversation with a question, asks, what is truth? And then we see Jesus go on to be crucified. Have you ever gotten to the end of a movie or a novel and one of the characters says a line that just feels like 1,000 pounds? The kind of line that not only grabs your attention, but wakes you up to the central theme of the story, what the story's been about this whole time. This might just be that kind of line. One that makes you want to reread the whole first 18 chapters again with eyes wide open to that word, truth. Watching to see how it weaves through the story, how it's used throughout the book. This word, truth, shows up in that classic conversation with Nicodemus in chapter 3. Nicodemus being a Jewish leader who is wrestling with the truth. Is Jesus really the Messiah? He's trying to figure this out. Should I be loyal to Jesus at the cost of my reputation, at the cost of my position, my career? And so he went to Jesus at night, under the cover of darkness. And after a long conversation with Jesus, of course, wraps up the conversation in this way. He says, "Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of the light because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light and won't come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed." Jesus is using the desire to remain in the darkness as a metaphor for guilt here. See, God, as you know, has wired us up to feel guilty when we've done something wrong, so that when we do evil, we tend to prefer to stay in the dark where what we've done can't be seen. Now, I doubt you need me to convince you of that. You know that to be true in your life. Now, check out the contrast that Jesus is about to make here. See, he's been talking about those who do evil and therefore hate the light. And so you would expect him to contrast that with those who do good and therefore love the light. But that's not what he does. He throws you a curveball here. Instead, he says, whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. See, Jesus contrasts evil-doing light haters not with good-doing light lovers, but rather he contrasts them with those who live their lives by the truth, in alignment with the truth. And whether they've done good or evil, they step into the light. That's what they do. Maybe they're stepping into the light unafraid because their conscience is clear that day. Or maybe they step in with much courage because they know that they've done wrong. In either case, they step into the light knowing that the only one who actually matters, the one they have ultimately sinned against, has already seen what they've done. He is the one they are ultimately accountable to, and they live out that basic truth. They live in that light. Those who live by the truth, they see their guilt, they experience their guilt as an invitation to step into the light. How about you? What do you do when you feel guilty? When your moral misstep, your screw up, your failure gets exposed so other people can see it, you try to cover it up with people pleasing, maybe try to compensate for the wrong that you did with helpfulness, being helpful. Or maybe guilt triggers you into attack mode, right? And you blame others to get the spotlight off of your misstep, and helps you obscure the facts of what you did. Or maybe when you feel guilty, you just straight up hide. You just withdraw from people. You find some place where you can't be seen, and you just kind of live there for a while. As common as all of those approaches are, there really is a better, freer approach. When you feel guilty, courageously step into the light. Name the shame. Name the wrong that you're feeling guilt over. Name it to yourself. Name it to your God in prayer. Name it to someone else in your life whom you trust, who follows Jesus. Because having someone in your life you can confess your sins to, that is just part of living by the truth, part of living in the light. And you got to notice Jesus' phrase here. He says, whoever lives by the truth, right? Actually, more literally, that phrase that he's using is whoever does the truth, whoever practices it, whoever lives it out in a physical way, which is a fascinating way of saying it, isn't it? Now, you might be thinking, wait a second, I thought the truth was something to be believed, like, with your brain. Well, yeah, it might start there, but it eventually has to mature into your physical life, your flesh. Now, we've wondered before in this room about this line that we often hear our world say, live your truth. And when people preach that line in our world, it's often, mixed with some confusion about the nature of truth, as if truth is something that emerges from within you, as if truth can be reduced to, your truth, so that something can be true for you, but not necessarily true for others. As if reality itself is, determined by our feelings and preferences. And so, while the live your truth mantra is, perhaps a little confused, you got to admit, it gets one thing very right. The truth is indeed meant to be lived. While the truth itself isn't subjective, our relationship to it, the way we embrace it, the way we hold it, the way we let it compel us into action, that absolutely is. It must be. As Søren Kierkegaard says, he says, the highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but if one will, are to be lived. Truth is meant to be lived. I think there is an appropriately strong hunger in our world to live truly, to live in a way that fully aligns with your values, beliefs, and priorities, to live in a way that fully expresses your true self, who you really are. And there's something very right about that. Yes, absolutely. Be true to yourself. The problem, of course, is how do you know who your true self is exactly? What is your true identity, and how could you possibly know your true identity? Do you figure that out by listening to your feelings? Fickle as they are, they're not reliable guides for you. Do you figure it out by following your desires and the way you prioritize those desires? Goodness, I think you know how often those get disordered and jacked up, confused. You probably aren't going to find out who you truly are only by looking within. You're going to be a ship at sea, drifting wherever that wind blows, without a map and without a destination. You're never going to reach land that way. No, you need to be told who you are. Not by me, not by this world, not by your tribe. You need to be told who you are ultimately by the one who designed you. The one who knows you better than you know yourself because he loved you into existence. He is the reality. He is the truth your identity is accountable to. So if you want your ship to reach land in this lifetime, he has got to be the one setting the direction of your sail. So that in the end, it's not living your truth that gets you there, but rather it's living the truth that gets you home. But come on, knowing what's true, discerning it from what's not true, what's false, pretty tough project these days, isn't it? Maybe you're familiar with that MIT study or the findings of that MIT study published in 2018 that found that false news, false information online travels faster and farther and deeper and more broadly than the truth, than true information. It actually looks like false information actually spreads 6 times faster than factual information. Did you know that? Have you heard that? That's crazy. That should keep you up at night. Now, why might that be? What is it? What is it about exaggerations and half-truths that gets you to click faster and more faithfully? Your fears and your desire to be disgusted with other people. Those things are very easily exploited by all the algorithms that are set to make a buck off your clicks. And even more deeply, those things are very easily exploited by a very real enemy. A spiritual enemy who is dead set on destroying you from the inside out through deceit. Lies are his weaponry. It's possible, actually, to be so grounded in his half-truths and exaggerations, so grounded in things that are untrue, that the truth can be right in front of you, plain as day, and you can't recognize it as such. while Pilate is probably the most obvious and ironic example in the Gospel of John, he isn't the only one. In John 8, Jesus is talking to these Jewish leaders who, for whatever reason, they can't seem to recognize the truth when it is right under their noses. Why is that? Jesus asks. Why don't you understand what I'm saying? It can only be because you can't hear my word. Maybe it's because you are from your father, the devil. It's a charming line from Jesus right there. And you're eager to get on with what he wants. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he's never remained in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he tells lies, he speaks what comes naturally to him because he is, by very nature, a liar. In fact, he's the father of lies. That's how Jesus knows him. That's how he thinks of Satan. So like Jesus, we actually do believe there is a spiritual enemy at work in our world, and he speaks the language of deceit. And it would make sense if he's the one behind all this stuff. It would make sense if he's actually also behind another trend I could swear I've been observing lately. If I didn't know better, I think we've begun to grow weary of asking the question, is it true? Maybe it's just the younger generations. Maybe it's broader than that. I don't know. But I don't hear that question as often as I think I used to. And if I'm right about that, I think I can see how we've gotten to this point, how that question has begun falling out of style. I think it might be the result of a kind of fatigue, truth claim fatigue. Did it originate in a lab or didn't it? Can a person's sexual orientation change or can't it? Which is it? Was it really someone else? Or was it OJ? What's up with eggs? These things good for me? Or are they not good for me? Are they unhealthy? Like there's a million of these things. These debatable truth claims just floating around us all day. And you can't just rely on the experts, right? Because for every, credentialed expert on one side of the debate, you got two on the other side, right? So, you're left to fact checking. Well, how on earth is any person possibly supposed to check all these claims? And even if you could, you'd have to fact check the fact checkers, of course, because they're biased, right? Ain't nobody got time for all that. And then you add to that just an ounce of postmodern cynicism, assuming that behind every truth claim, there's some kind of self-serving motivations, financial, political, some other motivations to gain or maintain power, all of which lead to the spinning of stories, the omission of details, and goodness, it's no wonder how a person can lose heart, how a person these days might even come to the conclusion, you know what, it's impossible to get down to the truth, so why try? And then the truthfulness of a claim slowly gets replaced with the usefulness of a claim. Who cares if it's true? Does it get me clicks and likes? Question is, does believing it help me in some way? I actually wonder if this mix of pragmatism and cynicism is actually the tone of Pilate's question. Jesus says, listen, all who are on the side of truth, listen to me. And Pilate says, truth? Come on. What is that? Honestly, Jesus, the truth is really less important to me than your usefulness to me in this moment. Listen, I'm going to try to persuade the crowd of your innocence, but listen, ultimately, I'm going to do what I need to do to prevent a riot and to maintain my position. Truth? What is that? So I realize that the more contemporary question to ask is probably something more like, is Christianity good for me? I realize that's more the question of the day. And I realize it might sound old-fashioned for me to encourage you to ask the question, are the claims of Christianity true? But listen, for those of us who already believe that these claims are true, we think of that "is it true" question as a great on-ramp into the truth. So you got to forgive us. Be patient with us. Christianity really does make a few absolutely fundamental truth claims. They're either true or false. A creator God exists. It's true or false. Jesus was raised from the dead. True or false? Jesus is the boss of the universe. Fact or fiction? True or false? These are totally fundamental claims. And honestly, Christianity even admits, hey, if these basic things aren't true, no need to be a Christian. You can look elsewhere. Don't waste your time here. So forgive us for insisting. Forgive me for insisting that the "is it true" question is still a really good question for you to keep alive. But ultimately, if you are weary of asking that "is it true" question, and you are therefore tempted to give up on this whole Christian thing, before you go, before you do, you gotta know that Christianity is far more than the sum of all of its truth claims. The truth, as Jesus understood it, is bigger, way bigger than just a list of propositional statements to believe or not believe. To know the truth, according to the Bible, is way less like knowing and believing a set of facts. And it's far more like knowing a person. It is no small thing that Jesus doesn't simply say, "My words are true." And hey, fellas, the things that I'm telling you are rock solid true. He does say that all over the place and throughout John. But he goes further than that. Jesus says this, you know the line, John 14. He says, I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. If Pilate asked a 1,000-pound question, this is the 1,000-pound answer. Jesus is saying, if you're searching for the way to your ultimate destination, the way to your truest self, I am that way. You're looking for your best life, your truest life, I am that life. You looking to build your life on rock solid truth, align your life with stuff that's absolutely true, I am that stuff. I am that absolute truth. It is no small thing that Jesus claims to be the truth. That means that for the Christian, the truth is more than a set of claims you either believe or reject. It's more than a set of doctrinal propositions you can memorize and talk about. The truth, the absolute truth, is more, bigger than the sum of all true statements that can be uttered. It's bigger than that. For the Christian, the truth is a person, not a list of facts. And therefore, knowing the truth is far more like knowing a person than knowing facts about a person. Now, I realize that a statement like that has the potential to shake up a paradigm a little bit. Could. Can change the way you operate. And so you might want to consider these two extensions of that fundamental starting point. First, if you are wanting to know the truth for yourself, if you want to know the truth, you might consider learning less and obeying Jesus more. Now, don't hear me as saying stop learning, okay? As if, pursuing Jesus with your mind isn't a helpful thing. I'm not at all saying that you should stop engaging this whole thing on an intellectual level. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, heads up. Be careful not to underplay a most critical ingredient in coming to know the truth. Obedience. You gotta listen to the connection that Jesus makes here. He says, if you remain in my word, he says, you will truly be my disciples, my followers. That's an identity statement, by the way. And then you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Whew. goodness. I don't claim to know all that Jesus is intending here in this line because it's loaded. But at the very least, Jesus sees a connection between remaining in his word, keeping and following his teachings, obeying him, and knowing the truth. It could be that obeying him unlocks things in our heart and mind, removes obstacles that would otherwise block a person from understanding the truth on a cognitive level. Could be. Or it could also be that obeying him is the primary way you come to know the truth as he wishes to be known. To obey him is to know him. See, knowing, learning, memorizing Jesus' words, it's an on-ramp into knowing about him, no doubt. But engaging with his words, hearing and doing his words, obeying his words is the on-ramp into knowing him. So when you wash each other's feet, when you serve others in the way that he has served you, when you take care of your neighbor, your brother, your sister, your spouse, your next door neighbor, take care of your neighbor as you take care, in the same way you take care of yourself. Whenever you forgive, whenever you love your enemies as he has loved you, you come to know him and the freedom that he brings. Secondly, if you are wanting to help others know the truth, you might consider speaking less and serving more. Now, don't hear me as saying stop telling people about Jesus. As if articulating and preaching Jesus with your words isn't absolutely critical to the health of our world. It is. I'm not at all giving you permission to wuss out on, telling people about Jesus. What I am saying is, heads up. Be careful not to underutilize what might just be the most effective tool God has given you to help others come to know the truth. Our world has a hard time believing that it's even possible to love people you disagree with. You go show them otherwise, will you? You go serve people. You go love on people that you fundamentally disagree with. God has been so incredibly patient with you. So go show this world that patience. You know that there's people outside these walls who are completely convinced that God is not for them, but rather against them. You know that? Go show them otherwise. There's people in our town, on your street, who have a hard time believing. They just can't believe that God can love people with lives that are jacked up by sin and confusion. You show them otherwise, will you? Years ago, when I was one of the pastors at a small campus ministry at the U of I, we offered a very simple conversational English practice thing to international students. Native English speakers from our ministry would sit across the table from native English speakers from our ministry, sit across the table from international students and visiting scholars and spouses of those scholars. And really anybody who wanted a little extra conversational English practice could come and just talk. It was awesome. It was a fantastically simple way of serving people. And eventually, this turned into, a Bible study with internationals who were curious about Christianity, who wanted to learn a little bit about it when they were here in the States. And I will never forget what my dear Japanese friend Eiji said to me. One night after the Bible study, I was driving him back to his apartment. And Eiji, was far from being a Christian. And he'd heard about Jesus, I think, as, the great moral teacher of Christianity. And that was probably about the extent of it, really. And so I asked him, what he thought of the Bible study. And I'm sure I was, trying to gauge whether or not he found Christianity to be credible, believable, true. And the way he responded, I think you probably sensed that, and the way he responded to me absolutely changed my understanding of evangelism. He said, I've enjoyed the study, but Chip, I got to tell you, I've not been coming and learning about Christianity to know if Christianity is true or false. I've been coming because I like you, and I want to understand you. On a different night after the study, I got an email from one of the guys who attended the study. He's a Taiwanese student named Richard, now a dear friend of mine. His email said, Chip, I never told you why I am interested in Christianity, because I found something really different between Christianity and other religions I have ever known about, including Christianity in Taiwan. Christians I meet here, including you guys, let me totally change my impression of Christianity and let me realize that I only know little about this religion before. And because of your help, I think I'm getting close to the truth I'm looking for. Christians I meet here, they convince me the truth by showing me incredible love, friendship, enthusiasm, and their faith. I am really amazed at what I have experienced in here. Though I can't say I will believe in Christianity right away, it is not impossible for me to be a Christian anymore. Sincerely, Richard. It really is a blessing to have a lead guy who is good with his words. There's no doubt about that. Eddie has a gift for speaking the truth with precision and clarity. Such a blessing to our community, our church community, our local community. It's huge. And as great as that is, as critically important as it is for us to have a lead guy who delivers the truth clearly with words, the real impact in our town happens through you. The real impact happens when you live out your faith in Jesus here in Springfield. Looking Jesus in the eye, Pilate asks, what is truth? And knowing the truth about Jesus' innocence, knowing that Jesus isn't actually guilty of a crime that warrants crucifixion, Pilate goes ahead, sends him out to be crucified anyway to appease the crowds. And to make this tragic irony even richer, Pilate, probably just to agitate the Jews, just to provoke them, as he was prone to do, he had a sign made to be hung on the cross with Jesus. And in 3 different languages, that sign read this: Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Then when the Jewish leaders saw this, they protested. They said, no. He is not King of the Jews. Change the sign, Pilate. Make it say that he claimed to be the King of the Jews. And Pilate says, no, I've written what I've written. Isn't that rich? Pilate publicly proclaiming in 3 languages something that was incredibly true. His words were more true than he could possibly fathom, and yet he failed to live by the truth, failed to know the truth. May that never be said of me. May that never be said of you. There are people here in Springfield, at your work, in your neighborhood, maybe even in your home, who are asking this question: what good is it to believe in Jesus? What good is it to believe these Christian claims? They might even be asking Pilate's question. Truth? What is that? What's it matter? And the way that God wants to begin answering their question is by introducing them to you. He wants them to meet you. He wants them to see what it looks like for His words to be fleshed out in your life. So go show them, will you?